Pokémon Yellow is a game for the Nintendo Game Boy and Game Boy Color, released in the States in 1999. Created as the third installment in the first generation of Pokémon titles, it plays largely the same as Red and Blue, but features some tie-ins to the immensely popular Pokémon animated series, which follows Pokémon trainer Ash Ketchum as he pursues his dream of becoming Pokémon champion. I've decided to break down some of the mechanics of Pokémon Yellow. On a personal note, I love the Pokémon games, and I can't wait to tell you all about this handheld classic. So let's get started. Control mechanics. The controls of Pokémon Yellow are extremely simple and easy to understand. The Game Boy and Game Boy Color only have 4 buttons and a directional control pad, or D-pad. This limits complexity, which in the case of Pokémon Yellow is completely fine and even desirable as it makes the game accessible and easy to learn. To control the character in the overworld, the player uses the D-pad to direct their avatar around. Up goes up, right goes right, and so on. Easy. The D-pad is also used to navigate within menus, such as scrolling through your list of Pokémon. The A button is used to interact with objects or NPCs, meaning non-player characters, and to accept a choice, such as confirming to save the game. The B button is used to go back through menus, as a sort of no button. This control scheme is intuitive to those who've already played games, and easy to pick up for those who haven't. Like all games in the main Pokémon series, battles between Pokémon are turn-based, so here the D-pad is only used for menu navigation, not walking around. The player continues to use the A button to accept, and the B button to go back through a menu. Once the player has made their choice for their turn, the battle animates the outcome. The player uses the A button to continue through the dialogue presented until the turn is over. Control is then returned to the player to make the next choice, or to cycle through the end of battle dialogue if the battle is finished. Progression mechanics. Progression makes up the meat of Pokémon Yellow, as with most RPGs. There are several progression systems at play here. Number 1, the Pokédex. The tagline for the Pokémon franchise is, "Gotta catch 'em all." This slogan is even reflected in the Pokémon anime protagonist's last name, Ketchum. Basically, the Pokédex is a database of all of the Pokémon you've encountered or caught on your Pokémon journey. The idea is to fill it up, which is done by, you guessed it, catching them all. When a player first encounters a new Pokémon, whether in a wild or trainer battle, their entry is partially revealed in the Pokédex. The player can check their name, appearance, and where in the wild they can be captured, if anywhere. Once a Pokémon has been caught, the entry becomes fully fleshed out with a short description and the Pokémon's height and weight stats. Of course, filling the Pokédex is optional and isn't required to beat the game, per se. It takes a lot of time, and trading with other players to complete fully, as not every Pokémon is available in Yellow natively. This makes filling the Pokédex inaccessible for players who don't have friends with other versions of the game, such as Pokémon Red or Pokémon Blue, or can't afford to purchase several copies for themselves. This sort of optional collection mechanic was popular in many games back in the 90s, such as Super Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie. A player could complete the game while only collecting a handful, but for those who really enjoy perfecting a game, it added more playtime and content to enjoy. This was before the days where downloading updates and extra game content was feasible for console and handheld games, or even with PC games all too often. To get extra content in PC games, players need to purchase extra discs to install, back then called expansion packs. This is kind of a tangent, but I think it's still interesting to consider. Extra collection-driven content is still occasionally present in newer games too, notably Breath of the Wild's Korok Seeds or the nostalgia-born Yooka-Laylee. But nonetheless, collectathons were a staple of 90s games aimed at kids. Number 2, training Pokémon. Okay, so honestly this is the most important progression mechanic in my eyes. In order to progress through the game's story, your Pokémon need to get better and better. Your opponents certainly will. As you use your Pokémon in battle, they'll gain experience points, or EXP, for winning, and luckily they don't lose any on losses or deaths. Getting EXP leads to leveling up, which increases a Pokémon's base stats, in turn making them more powerful. This kind of progression provides clear and obvious feedback to the player, and many Pokémon will also evolve into new, stronger versions of themselves. We can take Charmander as an example. A popular starter in Pokémon Red and Blue, Charmander evolves once it reaches level 16 into Charmeleon, and then again at level 36 into Charizard. For most evolutionary chains, the Pokémon retains some amount of recognizability to its humble beginnings in either name, appearance, or both as in Charmander's case. Evolving can be discussed as a progression mechanic in its own right too. There are many Pokémon that don't evolve through leveling up, but perhaps by trading to another player, like Haunter into Gengar, or by having an item used on them, such as the Thunderstone turning Pikachu into Raichu. In later games, novelty evolutions got even more creative, such as leveling up while the console is held upside down. Number 3, story progression. Pokémon Yellow has a narrative that carries the player from the time they're gifted their first Pokémon, a Pikachu, to the time they defeat the standing Pokémon champion and take the title for themselves. The story is progressed as the player follows the relatively linear path through the game world, fighting wild Pokémon and NPC Pokémon trainers to earn EXP for their Pokémon. There are several mini-dungeons throughout the game, such as the Power Plant or the Indigo Plateau, as well as towns with shops, healing centers, and the game's bosses, gym leaders. To be given access to the next area, the players must first defeat the boss of the current area. Each successive boss will have higher level Pokémon, so will require additional training and leveling up to beat. Upon defeating a boss, the player is rewarded a gym badge, signifying their victory over that leader. Once the player earns all 8 badges, they're granted access to the Elite Four, a difficult gauntlet of 4 tough bosses. The player is required to run them all in a consecutive line, hence gauntlet, and if they are defeated by one, they must begin at the first again. After this, the player fights the champion, so it's really a gauntlet of 5 bosses more or less, and if they beat the champion, they win, and the credits roll. Oh, also, there's a side plot centered around Team Rocket, the infamous villains of the first generation of the Pokémon games, which includes Yellow. Basically, Team Rocket tries to do nefarious things like steal Pokémon or hurt them or whatever, and they present some dungeons and mini-bosses as you navigate through the game world. Other than the Pikachu the player receives as their first Pokémon, Team Rocket present the other most obvious anime tie-in as the sprites match the artwork of the anime villains Jessie and James. Their Pokémon team also matches. The player gets feedback from their progress through the story by unlocking more areas and by continuing the plot. Badges in particular serve as narrative totems to be earned, and can be viewed in an inventory screen, along with playtime and the player's current money. Uncertainty mechanics. Pokémon games in general are heavily influenced by RNG, which stands for Random Number Generator. In this context, it means that many actions and results in the game are determined by random chance, which can be influenced by a variety of factors. For example, in battle, your Pokémon's attacks will generally connect and make an impact on the opponent. Sometimes, determined randomly, your attack can land as a critical hit, which increases the damage dealt. Or sometimes, again, determined randomly, the attack can miss entirely. These determinations can be influenced by items, like Dire Hit, which increases critical hit chance, or combat moves. If an opponent uses Sand Attack on you, you're more likely to miss. Some attacks have these influences more or less built in. Some moves are inherently more likely to be a critical hit, or to miss, although the attacks that tend to be less accurate also tend to be more powerful when they do land. Outside of battle, RNG affects the Pokémon the player might run into in the wild. Each wild area has a specific pool of Pokémon that can spawn there, and each is assigned a rarity. When an encounter is triggered, RNG determines the Pokémon that will be selected as the opponent. When attempting to capture a Pokémon, RNG is also used to determine success or failure. This can be influenced by the type of Pokéball used. The more expensive Great Ball gives a boost to catch rate, and the top tier Ultra Ball increases it even more. This is important as some Pokemon also have inherently lower catch rates. Rare and high level Pokemon in particular tend to be more difficult to catch. Legendary Pokemon, which are one-of-a-kind trophy Pokemon of sorts, have very low catch rates, so very unlucky players may find themselves stuck in battle for a long time, throwing Ultra Ball after Ultra Ball and crossing their fingers that this is the one. Uncertainty is integral to the Pokémon game's overall system and way of functioning. It gives the games, including Yellow, an element of excitement and a feeling of freshness. When looking for a rare Pokémon, for example, there's little that beats the excitement of finally seeing its silhouette sliding into view as the battle begins. Similarly, after seeing the 1000th Zubat in a cave you've been lost in for 20 minutes, you'll definitely remember to buy repels before you hit a dungeon next time. Resource management. There are several resources in the Pokémon games, and the most unobviously obvious ones are the Pokémon themselves. It's true, each Pokémon has unique elemental typing and is limited in that only 6 can be carried at one time. Moreover, some moves, like Flash or Strength, are required to get past certain areas in the game world. Players must make sure to make room on their team for a Pokémon that knows, or can be taught, these critical moves if they're heading through an area that demands them. When fighting tough battles like the gym leaders, it's wise for players to make sure their team is diverse in its elemental typing, so that battles go as smoothly as possible. For example, the first gym leader, Brock, uses rock and ground type Pokémon. Yellow has a painfully slow early game, as the player receives Pikachu, an electric type that is weak against rock and actually entirely ineffective against ground type Pokémon. The player must look around in the wild before fighting Brock for other Pokémon that can defeat his. There are a few Pokémon available so early on that are effective against him, unfortunately, so players must make do with what they can find. The second gym, led by water-type user Misty, is much more forgiving and should be a breeze for Pikachu, who's super effective against water types. Many type matchups are common sense. Electric is good against water, water is good against fire, etc. But there are some more abstract types too, like Ghost or Psychic. Players would do well to learn what types match up favorably. In this way, type distribution is an important resource on a team. There are also more universal resources, such as money or items. There are a variety of items in the Pokemon games, like balls for catching Pokemon, healing potions, or stat boosting items. Your inventory space is limited, so players want to be smart about how much space they dedicate to different things. It's important to stock up on healing items before heading into a dungeon or a gym battle, for example. Also, to maintain sanity in dungeons, repels. Please don't forget to bring repels. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you learned something about the mechanics of Pokemon Yellow.